You are about to consult sensitive information. You will not be subject to any memetic or amnestic agents during or after your reading. You will not be subject to any localization, incarceration, armed intervention, or execution. You have the right to know, but you are not obligated to. Sorry I'm late, folks. Time waits for no man. Unfortunately, headaches wait for no man either, and I was quite unwell yesterday. Today the headaches are gone, and in their place I have some lovely allergies to deal with. That's exciting. So that is kind of impacting the sound quality, and I apologize. We'll get through it, though. This is the Week 29 recap on SCP Cafe. I'm your host, Blue Soul, SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog-better, Tottenham Hotspur supporter, clone aficionado, and new hub page owner. On the SCP Wiki, the SCP Cafe hub has been posted, and that has all of the links, every work that I've ever covered on a cafe show is directly linked, and in addition, there is an archived version available on the SCP Cafe Wiki. Now, I'm going to talk about the Wiki in greater depth, if not next week, the week after, because it's not quite where I want it to be just yet, but it does have a copy of every article exactly as it was when I reviewed it, and that is relevant because changes happen to works over time, and sometimes things that I talk about in the past aren't really relevant now. So you look at the thing and you go, well, what's he talking about? That isn't an issue. I don't even see that. Well, it was there then and now it's not. So what I've done is gone through painstakingly and found the revision on the wiki for each article as I reviewed it and moved them over to the SCP Cafe wiki. And now that is something that's pretty easy to do going forward. I just have to get it as it is in this instant. But doing it in the past, having to go back to stuff from last December took a little time and effort. So, but I think it's worth it because now I've got this sort of preserved document as it was during the recording, and that way you get to see it as I saw it at the time. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example. In the very first show, 2018, week 51, SDP Big Egg. Big Egg has changed a little bit over the last 8 months or so, and now it has it has a lot of the stuff that it used to have, but it has some stuff that it didn't have when I recorded it, and I gotta say, I liked it better as it was. So the archived versions are basically like a time capsule. They're a little preserved moment in SCP Wiki history that you can refer to at any time to get exactly what I saw. The collaboration contest is over. We have winners. Third place, Ip and Uncle Nicolini with a collaboration between Chicago Spirit and The Factory. That was SCP-4256 and Carol 280 Barrels of Hooch. Those were both really good pieces. In second, Not a Seagull and Multiverse, collab between Eric and Maxwellism. And Maxwellism got mentioned a couple of times during this contest. This was SCP-4688 and Eric's Journal. And in first, Kindly Turtle Clem and Floppy Phoenix, the collaboration between the Fifth Church and the Church of the Second Hightoth with Land of Honey and SCP-4475. Now, the CollabCon recap will be maybe not this coming Tuesday. I'm actually kind of really busy out of nowhere, so it may not be Tuesday like I wanted. It may be the week after, but we will be talking about each and every piece that was submitted in CollabCon. It'll be a two-part episode. The first part will go over everything outside of the top three. There'll be quicker little recaps of everything, and then the second part will go over the 6 pieces that comprise the top 3 entries in depth in more of a typical recap format. So watch for those. When I have news, I will put it out there. Those will be bonus content. They will go out a week early to patrons. Moving on, we don't have a lot of skips this week, and that's really weird. This came out of nowhere. We don't have, yes, we had a contest end, but it's been closed for posting for 3 weeks now, or just about, and we only had 6 positively rated entries this week from Thursday to Wednesday. So I'm going to talk about all of them. I don't see why not. It's going to be more of a throwback show. And truth be told, one of these is pretty small in the first place, so it will be more or less like a normal show. We're just going to talk about everything that survived in week 29. And we're going to kick things off. SCP-4869, titled Boltz From The Blue by Many Meats. This article has no images anywhere in the piece and an object class of neutralized. The containment procedures are one sentence saying it's been neutralized, so there are no necessary procedures. The defunct procedures have been archived for posterity. That's in a collapsible that indicates that due to its biological fragility, a containment chamber has been constructed around the skip within Pataphysics Room 104 at Site 19. This room is classified as a containment cell until permanent accommodations can be arranged. It's contained within a 550-liter plexiglass tank filled with an oxygenated electrolytic solution with protein nuts, nutritional supplements dissolved in water and added to the tank every 8 hours. Waste materials are to be skimmed from the surface. Sounds like a fish, but it's not. We'll get there. The pH is kept within a certain range, 7.35 to 7.45. Any deviation is to be corrected and then reported, At this time, requests for media such as music and audiobooks are to be granted. The skip may access these materials per its discretion between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. And we go on to describe the skip as a humanoid brain and brain stem capable of communicating via anomalously generated sound waves. So we are keeping this brain in water with nutrients provided, and we're going to leave some of how it sustains itself kind of up to the reader and up to your imagination. I don't know how you feed a brain and keep it going, but apparently we are good at that. We go on to in the description to say that it possessed cognition and sapience comparable to that of a middle-aged adult human, as well as its own fully formed personal identity. Now, if you are wondering about the title, Boltz From The Blue, yes, Boltz does have a Z in it, and if that doesn't make any sense, we'll talk about it at the end of the piece. The skip's knowledge of history conformed to normalcy, but none of the events that it claimed to have subjectively experienced were verified as having occurred. Addendum 1 and Addendum 2 have additional details. And we have a convention here that it's used throughout the piece. Dateline 2011-11-02, SCP-4869 spontaneously manifested in Pataphysics Room 104. This dateline and the date is something I don't really see in pieces. It's interesting. I don't have a really strong opinion on it, but it is distinct. I don't see it very often. But yeah, this brain spontaneously manifested within the research and development wing of the Pataphysics department. Personnel present at the time were engaged in research for, and we have this project code name Taiki in bold with square brackets around it. They had been utilizing this room for several weeks. Internal sensors reported a brief non-harmful spike in gamma radiation immediately prior to the manifestation of the skip, but were unable to record any other precursors to it. It manifested within a 20-liter container of distilled water, where its sudden appearance caused the displacement of water and subsequent damage to electronics and paper records within the room. We recognized the biological nature of it, assessed it for signs of life, and transported it into an electrolytic solution upon which the containment was focused around. And we go into addenda from here. And they are, the first 3 of them are all interviews between Dr. Manny Eats, and I might mention that later. Between Dr. Eats and the skip, the brain in a, it's not quite a jar, it's closer to a fish tank, isn't it? So we Dr. Eats addresses the skip. The brain refers to itself as David, Dr. David Weller, a PhD in physics from UC Berkeley. To which Dr. Eats responds that he is also a UC grad, Cal State Fullerton. And the skip basically says that they go over their thoughts. They were at home on their laptop, lying in bed, running algorithms on a data set. They were collecting data on angular momentum of near-Earth objects, all this academic stuff that they were doing, and closed their eyes, and the next thing they know, they were here. Remembered coming to, not being able to see, a burning in my chest like I was drowning and struggling for air. The blur subsided and the burning gave way. I saw men and women in lab coats. The folks that put me in this jar looking at me with grotesque fascination through the distortions in the glass. And we ask, can you describe the differences in sensation you're feeling right now? And they reply, I'm aware I'm a brain in a jar, if that's what you're asking. The biggest difference is that I don't really have a distinct sense of orientation. Every part of me feels simultaneously right side up and upside down. It's very bothersome, and if I could walk, I'd imagine I'd be stumbling everywhere right now. And we ask, well, speaking of legs, do you have a connection to any other parts of your body? What other sensations are you feeling? It says, I'm not sure how to answer that. I can feel my chest rising and falling as I breathe. I can feel my own voice reverberating in my ears as we talk. My body, all of it, all the memories of what I should feel are within me. Reality simply doesn't align with my perception, that's all. Maybe I'm merely recalling the sensation. I don't know. And Dr. Eats asks, so you're saying this feels natural for you? And the brain replies, come on, Doc, how many times have you become brain in a jar before? I know I've never done it, so imagine my surprise to suddenly be one. I'm freaked out in every applicable sense. I've ran through the whole checklist of things. How am I talking? How am I breathing? How am I thinking without a body? And 1,000,001 more questions over the last however long before you've had me here. Eventually, it's all kind of mushed together. I'm not even sure where to go from here. I don't know what to answer first. I'm stunned. And we ask, have you tried any metaphysical exercises such as willing it to be different, advanced meditation? It feels like an out-of-place line, but it is to sort of a setup here. He says, I'm constantly trying. Well, aside from this very minute, the only thing on my mind right now is that someone really needs to feed my cats. I've got 2 of them, both calicos, and if my body is back there in my apartment, I'd rather get the cats fed before they turn desperate enough to nibble on me, and they give an address in Pasadena. And we go check, and we could not find the apartment. Well, to be fair, we found an apartment, but it belonged to a 4-person family that had been there for a number of years. We thought maybe they transposed a digit, so we tried some other variations of it, but that didn't get us anywhere either. Then we consulted the tax records, and there was nothing under your name. And we asked, do you care to try again? And go on to say, I did some further digging, and other parts of your story have not added up either. When did you graduate from Berkeley exactly? And the brain says, I must admit I'm taken aback by this. I live at 3141. I have for nearly 8 years. All my bills, all my mail, my Amazon shipping, everything. It all says David Weller, 3141 Flecker Street. You must have looked on South Flecker. Please check the other end of the street. And Dr. Eat says, I understand this may be jarring to hear, but we were very thorough. In fact, I went back to property records as far as 30 years, just in case you have been displaced for a lot longer than you thought. And gets cut off. And the skip says, please, I live on Flecker Street. Go find my cats or we're... I'm sorry, you don't deserve this kind of a reaction. I know you're just following up on what I've told you. You have to understand, though, that it feels like gaslighting from my perspective. I am certain I've told you the right information. It's 3141, just like I said. I picked it because of pi, and that's not the type of quirky thing you just forget. And Dr. Eat says, I appreciate the clarity. I'll do what I can to dig deeper and recheck what you've told me. We'll get to the bottom of this. So, 3 days pass, and we have our third interview. We sent another recon team to Pasadena. We had no luck at all. We didn't gain any new information in the intervening 3 days. So the first thing the brain does is apologize to Dr. Eats for losing their cool in the last meeting. And he said, I was hoping I could tell you a bit more about what I remember. Maybe you can track down some of my colleagues or family and confirm some details through them. It's not impossible I got some details wrong, I have to admit that. So the more people you can fact check me with, the faster you'll be able to get to the bottom of things. And we say, yeah, that makes sense. We'll take info and send a transcriptionist down to let you be more thorough. And they start giving not quite a life story, but a lot of detailed info. Born in Modesto in 1971, completed my undergrad, master's, and PhD all at Berkeley, ending in 99. I've been a research physicist and graduate sponsor at the university. I married a beautiful woman named Charlie. Her maiden name was Plymouth in 1998. We divorced in 2005. We have no kids. She moved out of state afterwards. I've got 2 cats, Tabitha and Jack. They were both adopted from the Humane Society in 2008. I paid cash, but there's an application form that I signed, and that should keep you busy with leads. So Dr. Eats, in response to all that, says, this is a bit unorthodox, but I'm going to ask you all the same, Dr. Weller. If I go look these things up, and it continues to not add up, are you going to want to know? I'm not sure the fruits of this investigation are something you're going to be able to handle for better or worse. Psych evaluations are a thing we offer, as well as counseling. And that's not to say you're afraid and in need, but rather to point out that it's something we offer, a tool for your well-being. And it says, I don't know, Doc. Every man has their limits, and as much as I can repeat that I'm holding up in the face of mine, we can never be completely certain until we're already over the line. If it were you, I'd bet you'd want to know, even if it disproves me and everything I claim. I can't call myself a scientist without pursuing the truth. Dr. Eat says, okay, but there are protocols about what I can and can't tell you. Information security, and how much I'm able to say isn't just my decision, so I hope you don't hold that against me. And it says, well, not unless there's a reason I should. Dr. Eat says, the facts that we do know are that a spontaneous burst of gamma radiation preceded the manifestation of one human brain inside a bucket of distilled water. By all accounts, it was an otherwise normal and quiet day for the people working in this room with no warning signs or preamble. There have been no further bursts of radiation or related phenomenon that we've been able to detect for giving us new leads or new information. And the brain, in response to that, says, so no one's taking credit for having sent me. And Dr. Eat says, no one, which I suppose means it's possible that no one sent you. I remember a number of rather ridiculous thought experiments from college physics that fit the bill for situations like this. And it says, what, you mean like chaos theory or some sort of entropic impossibility? And he says, yes, something like that. But things like that are only funny and interesting because they rely on bending the way language is forced to express fundamental laws. I suppose I've always found these impossibilities exciting, and that's why I'm here. And you can tell, like, this is going to be more conversational, less formal, less of the dialogue we usually expect from the Foundation. And to that point, as this conversation goes on, Operational Control pages Dr. Eats via his earpiece and reprimands him for his lengthy personal diversion. So he apologizes, says, I have work to do on my end with the details you've given me. I'll be back when I have an update. And the brain says, goodbye, Manny. And Dr. Eats says, goodbye, David. Addendum 4 sees Dr. Eats going to bat for this skip to the Ethics Committee, asking for quality of life improvements, the access to the music library, audiobooks, as well as any other non-classified materials that we could give it to keep it stimulated and ongoing social interaction. And this is all granted, contingent on good behavior. In Addendum 5, in December 8th, so nearly a month later, preceded by a short burst of gamma radiation, SCP-4869 demanifested. It's reclassified as neutralized with a 90-day contingency for potential rediscovery. The 6th and last addendum is 1 week. I'm sorry, not 1 week. This is 2 months and a week later. A pataphysics researcher, Dr. Michelle Wilkes, requested an interview with Dr. Eats regarding the decommissioning of 4869, and we have some light shed on the root causes here. Dr. Wilkes, for her part, is not super enthused about this interview. Indicates that Dr. Eats has asked for the project brief for Taiki half a dozen times, and I have to ask what part of no wasn't made clear to you. And Dr. Eats basically says, I just want to know what went on in the room so we can put all this to bed and I can move on. I'm wanting the project brief so we can infer cause and effect and see where that takes us. And Dr. Wilkes says, no, I can't give you it, even with someone of your classification requesting it. You're not part of pataphysics, nor associated with the project in any way, so I don't really see the need to step on any toes. And Dr. Eats is not giving in quite that easily. Says, I need more than a code name, I need closure, and this is literally the only thread I have left. You aren't letting me pull on it, so please save us both the headache of me escalating this up the chain. I know both you and the site director hate loose ends, Michelle, and I do too. So there's a little bit of Foundation politics going on here, and this is actually pretty well executed. I've seen Mini-Meat's stuff before, in particular their critique, and they do have a good handle on professional interactions. This skip is composed of nothing but professional interactions. The brain was a doctorate level researcher, and that allows for a more educated, erudite sort of conversation to take place between the two. So Dr. Wilkes relents a little bit and gives a rough idea of what we're doing in this project, and asks to imagine the entirety of the universe is represented by a big box of black and white ping pong balls. They're jumbled up together and completely mixed up, but also constantly moving. And Eat says, entropy disorder, sure, I get that. And Wilkes says, this box will never be sorted properly by color or be placed into just the right configuration we want it in order to get the universe that we want. It's too chaotic and too big. It cannot happen. But if we zoom in on just a small little volume of that box and look at just a small number of ping pong balls, it's not only theoretically possible that they may spontaneously arrange or sort themselves, but it's also possible that we can now bring the resources and expertise to bear in order to arrange that space to our choosing. 8 says, so you're fucking with probability, trying to bend reality to do what you want. Do you understand the implications of making nearly impossible things happen? There's a negligible chance we're all killed by a gamma ray burst in an hour, but it's in no one's interest to make that more possible. You didn't write the laws of the universe, and I'm not sure how you can conclude you should try to edit them in your favor. Now, this is... Wilkes said the same thing that I was thinking, which is that being frank, it's not like your opinion on the matter is a factor. You're not in pataphysics. You have, no real claim on this project, and it's backed at a level significantly above your own. Dr. Reed says, you can think that the ends justify the means, but you're playing with lives. This is a lot of risks to be taking. And Wilkes says, what you really mean is that you're upset about 4869. And he says, yeah, I am. If your little pet project was responsible for the fluctuations that... He didn't ask to come into being, and he certainly didn't ask to leave it. He was a good person caught in a bad circumstance, and your tampering blinked him out of existence knowingly or otherwise. And she says, I'm admitting to nothing, but if it did have anything to do with our project, then he wouldn't count as a person at all. You yourself confirmed that nothing 4869 claimed happened was provable. No degree, no marriage record, no birth certificate, no property tax. Sometimes these things just happen, Manny, with no real explanation. And cracking open my project isn't going to bring you one. And he says, you've read my entries, I see. And she said, it only seemed fair to look into someone so intent on looking into me. And he says, let me be frank. I'm having trouble accepting that a human brain with human memories and experiences and intimate knowledge of our timeline just happened to appear in your team's lab with no intervention or man-made cause, all while you're in the midst of a project focused on quantum probability. Wilkes says, not really sure what to tell you, Eats. Sometimes the ping pong balls just line up. Eats says, yeah, what are the odds? And Wilkes says, apparently only nearly impossible. End article. I really like this piece. Now, we'll take a step back to the beginning where I said Boltz from the Blue, and it's actually referenced within the work a number of times, which is a little cheeky. There is a thought experiment called the Boltzmann brain, and it is based on entropy and chaos theory. Basically, like a real life version of the, 1 million monkeys and 1 million typewriters. Just the natural chaos and entropy in the universe is such that it is possible that a brain could spontaneously manifest in midair with its own thoughts and history, and then degrade as a brain would. And this is perhaps, this is left deliberately ambiguous. It is entirely likely this was caused by this project Tyche that Pataphysics is working on, but it's also possible that Wilkes is telling the truth, and that it is just, this most bizarre of near impossibilities happening in, in this timeline. So it's interesting on and it also kind of works on a number of levels, the bolts from the blue, that a bolt from the blue is, it's an idiom for a moment of brilliance out of nowhere, and we have this, brilliant physics doctorate manifesting as a brain in a jar. I really like the piece. The dialogue is all good. It is very formal. If it wasn't for the setting that it was placed in, I would take it to task for being maybe a little too formal, but given everything this was laid out, PhDs, researchers, other foundation staff, I think it's just fine. This was a very easy +1 from me. Moving on, SCP-4219, titled LUDROA, and that's in all caps, LUDROA. It is repeated throughout the work by Stark Moops. Now, this is their second piece to get covered on Cafe. Back in the Week 25 show, we covered SCP-5297-EX, and that was their first work. As far as I believe, this is their second, so they're off to a good start. We have an object class of Thaumiel, and no images anywhere in the work. The procedures are minimal. All 4219 strains are to be stored under medium security at Site-56's memetic stockpile. Any testing with the skip requires approval of at least one researcher with level 4 clearance. See Addendum 1 below. And then we have a collapsal that says input level 4 credentials. That says that no level 4 personnel may approve testing on the skip without specific authorization from at least one member of the O5 Council. Specific is probably a needless word, and I'm not sure really what we're doing here. We have a document that says testing requires the approval of a level 4, and the level 4 has access to a thing that says you can't approve the testing without the O5, at least one O5 approving it. Now, this would make more sense if it was something that was maybe as part of a rising action, something you could hint at later, saying, these rules were updated on this day in response to this event, but we don't do that. We just basically add this thing that says, hey, level 4, you can't actually approve this without an O5 signing off on it. Is there a reason that should be a secret, or should we just cut to the chase and let people know that it requires an O5? Maybe don't waste a level 4's time if you don't think an O5 is going to approve it. So the skip is described as a catch-all designation for a series of artificial, anomalous, informational entities codenamed LUDROA. LUDROA was specifically engineered by the Foundation to detect sapience. So there's some things to consider here. Artificial, anomalous, informational entities. That's a bit wordy, and the bigger issue that I think some people would have is the Foundation isn't generally in the business of creating anomalous items. We generally leave that to other GOIs. So I think you can still do this, but I think a more appropriate way perhaps is just a small wording change, that rather than saying it was engineered by the Foundation, maybe this was something we found, captured, got from another GOI, and then sort of rejiggered and changed to work in this manner. We removed some hazardous element or some reason that we're not just going out there creating anomalous things. Now, that said, the thing is quite useful the way it's described, that it works directly with cognition. A strain of LUDROA is activated by deploying a rudimentary benign memetic agent, and as with other memetic agents, observers that can't comprehend the ideas which compose a LUDROA meme do not trigger it, but if an observer comprehends it, the memetic agent activates, alerting the Foundation, and this alert function is its primary anomalous property. So the conceptual framework of any given LUDROA meme is composed of a series of basic philosophical ideas that all sapient beings should be capable of understanding. This is perhaps answering things that weren't necessarily asked, and that makes the description perhaps a little lengthier than it needs to be. It goes on to say, by alerting the Foundation when an observer successfully comprehends these basic ideas, it thus acts as a test for sapience. And after an entity comprehends one of these LUDROA memes and activates its alert function, the entity's memory of that meme will begin to deteriorate, and within a span of seconds, it will be unable to recall it or communicate it to others. These strains can be conveyed through a number of cognitohazardous vectors: sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. In addition, written strains have been translated into 167 different languages for Foundation use. Proof of concept testing has been good. Researchers using it were able to accurately distinguish D-class from non-sentient predictive language AI in 99.98% of cases, compared to 58.71% success for the Turing test. So, I understand what we're doing here as a literary device. You have some ideas of things you could do with this, and I only feel that this might be a little too wordy in answering some of those questions that weren't necessarily asked of it. Addendum 1 is a note to researchers that indicates that exposure to the skip is completely safe, but it's conveyed through cognitohazardous vectors, so be careful with it. Negligent or careless testing will expose it to third parties external to the test and screw up your data. Basically, that's what we're actually worried about, is you'll get false positives in your experiment. So in order to ensure studies using the skip meet the high standards necessary to guarantee accuracy and precision, researchers intending to conduct a test with it are required to formulate and compile a detailed written accounting of their proposed methodology, which must be reviewed and approved by at least one level 4 staff member before the test can proceed. That might be a little too much for what this is. If it is able to be conveyed through a number of different vectors, including touch, I don't feel like it needs this extra paragraph explaining how, 2 paragraphs explaining the dangers of false positives. These guys are scientists, they're aware of that, and they should be able to very simply run experiments without any real concerns along these lines. But this addendum was sort of set up to explain what happens in the first of 2 collapsibles. This is restricted to level 4, and it's a set of test logs, and it initially shows everything working as expected. We used a visual strain. Expected 5 sapiens, got 5. On 10 mice, expected none, got none. On a junior researcher, expected 1, got 1. On a human infant, 9 weeks old, expected none, got none. A comatose human, we expected 0 and got 0, and this is an unfortunate limitation of the skip. It needs to be perceived by a subject in order to work. So a negative result here could mean our coma patient isn't currently able to think conceptually. It could also mean that they simply aren't able to smell, because this was an olfactory strain. A D-class with borderline personality disorder, we expected 1, we got 1. Another D-class with obsessive compulsive disorder, expected 1, got 1. A clinically depressed D-class and Dr. Meyer, we expected 2, but only got 1. And the doctor says, they miscalibrated the timer on the cognitohazard. It was still going when I re-entered the testing room and I got an eyeful, but that's beside the point. Either there's a huge hole in LUDROA, or there's something very important about the D-class that we don't know. We need to run this one back now. So the pacing is not good. We raised the action too much too fast. The doctor is giving a sense of urgency that doesn't match up with everything we've had before, and it is a little jarring. We go into a new test. Basically, from going forward, the remaining 7 tests, or 8 tests, I should say, all give inaccurate counts. Our clinically depressed D-class, we expected 0 and detected 1, and I don't understand why that would be. We try it again half an hour later with a different strain, expected none, got 1. We test, the doctor tests themselves with the same strain, expected 1, got none. So we're not explaining very well at all what's going on here, and we actually never really do. Through the rest of these, we expect none, get none. Through taste, tactile, we have an auditory meme that's used on this same doctor. Expected none, got 15. And on an empty chamber, expected none, got 15. We have a set of level 5 credentials that said, following the testing performed on the 8th, Dr. Meyer was placed under covert surveillance by Foundation security. We had no issues until August 29th, when they began to vocalize extreme distress while at their workstation. They were approached by concerned security guards. He panicked and fled, attempting to enter Site 56's memetic stockpile before being subdued. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Dr. Meyer had exploited his access to Foundation memetics and anti-memetics to compromise several hundred Foundation personnel, including his surveillance detail. With the help of these subverted personnel, Dr. Meyer appropriated substantial Foundation assets, including web crawlers, software, air filtration systems, and air and ground-based drone fleets. Shielded from immediate discovery by several anti-memetic agents, Dr. Meyer used these assets to carry out an unauthorized test of LUDROA. So this supplemental test, we used an auditory strain with the subject of Earth. We expected roughly 7.7 billion sapients, and the detected field exceeds it by a factor of, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million. So somewhere between 1 and 9.9 trillion sapients. And we end the article there. So this work suffers from chronic inscrutability. I can't tell what's going on in these test logs. We explain a little bit, but I don't think it's sufficient to fully explain everything we were seeing. That perhaps I guess I'm supposed to assume that they sort of went rogue and they were conducting tests to check if their use of anti-memetics was working, but it's not elaborated on nearly enough. We have empty spacing between some of these tests. There's white spacing that I think is supposed to add drama, but it doesn't do anything really for me. I don't know. This piece, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, but not in a good way. It doesn't leave me really dying to know what's going on. It more just leaves me confused. And this is a sentiment that was sort of echoed in the comments for this, that we can't really tell what's going on. And the payoff at the end with this sapiens expected 7.7 billion, and we got something, between 1 and 10 trillion, it falls flat because we built up far too quickly to it, and we didn't know it was coming. Like our test 14, right before we did this, we expected 0 in an empty chamber and detected 15. So what does that mean? Does that mean there's 15 invisible sapient beings? Are they ghosts? Are they butt ghosts? Could be. We're in the Foundation labs. But it falls flat. I don't know what we're really trying to get at, and that hurts this piece fairly badly. This is the importance of... this was something I was going through recently with the UIU format of however obvious you think you need to be about 10 times more obvious. By the time you are going, oh my God, people, what more do I have to do? You're probably about there. And it may need to be just a little more obvious than that. Because you know what you're thinking. You know the setup and what you're trying to put out in the piece. And in order to preserve the mystery, you will try to withhold things. You'll try to omit things. The problem with that is that we tend to maybe expect too much from the readers, that they'll be able to piece so many things together. The fact is, you can't rely on that amount of focus from the readership either, because, if you're trying to keep 3 or 4 different loose ends open and try to explain them in very subtle ways, we're not keeping track of them that closely, and it kind of works to, it becomes a detriment to the piece. So this is a no vote from me. There's an interesting idea here. I like the skip itself as a thaumiel as far as we can use it to detect sapience, but I don't think this was the payoff that it was really meant for. So OK needs a fair amount of work, and it is a no vote from me. Moving on, SCP-371J. We got a joke article today, and it's titled Peanut Funny, XD peanut emoji, crying laughing emoji. It's by Uncle Nicolini. It also has no images. Really strange sort of thing we got going. And you know what? This probably could have used an image. This was neutralized, formerly Euclid, so containment procedures are not applicable. The description is that it is a single-shelled peanut seed, in more sciencey scientific notation, possessing cognitohazardous properties. When the peanut is perceived by a human subject, they will begin laughing with varying intensity. The intensity at which the laughter is induced is dependent on the amount of time a subject has spent working at a Foundation site, regardless of position or security clearance. Observed effects range from the spontaneous onset of pneumothorax, collapsed lung, on civilians to a moderate smile among various site directors. Subjects exposed to it will continue to laugh until they expire or it is removed from their vicinity. It's currently unknown why 371J's properties are related to the Foundation. Research into its creation, motives, and possible suspects responsible are currently under investigation. It was discovered following the death of 43 civilians in a Tokyo art exhibit, with all causes of death being attributed to a lack of oxygen. Foundation agents located and contained 371J, but 2 personnel suffered injuries from falling after losing consciousness due to excessive laughter. So we have a test log, and a D-class that's been around for a day had a collapsed left lung and expired before treatment could be administered. D-class with Foundation for 5 months laughed until losing consciousness. A researcher there for a year laughed until it was removed from their presence. They suffered a minor headache and abdominal pain caused by lack of oxygen and laughter, respectively. Dr. Everwood, 6 years with the Foundation, laughed moderately, but no negative side effects were found. Dr. Walters, 16 years with the Foundation, laughed briefly upon initial exposure before becoming silent again. Dr. Gears, for 28 years with the Foundation, verbally expressed mild annoyance at the presence of 371J at the start of the test and did not exhibit a noticeable change in expression or attitude throughout the duration. And Janitor Worth, employed for 59 years with the Foundation, destroyed 371J's shell and consumed its contents. Upon being questioned, subject replied, "Trust me, I'm doing you a favor." Following this event, 371J's anomalous properties did not manifest. The anomaly was reclassified as neutralized. Now, that's the end of the article. When the janitor says, "Trust me, I'm doing you a favor," that's a link. It's a link to the wiki's licensing guide. So what we have here, I figure most of the listeners kind of get what we're doing here, or what Nico's doing. I won't take any credit for this. Peanut being the sort of name that we've attached, well, again, not me, others, have attached to 173. And it is one of these things like there's a subreddit, the Church of Peanut. It is still one of those like ubiquitous things on Dank Memes from Site 19 subreddit, as well as Meme Mondays on our SCP. And this is basically that the longer you're around the Foundation, the less funny it becomes. And even like a lot of this younger generation of writers and authors and staff members, it doesn't take long for it to get really old really fast. And I think from our perspective, it's because there's so much work. There's so many incredible pieces on the wiki. There's over 10,000 articles on the wiki now. And, 173 is still what, people are making jokes about. It's been around for 11 years now, and that's still the thing. We're still beating that dead horse. So the Trust Me, I'm Doing You a Favor link to the licensing guide is because 173 is a legal quagmire, and any reproductions of it are at your own risk. We're not stepping in for you. It is copyrighted. So as a joke, I get it. I love it. It hits awfully close to home. AIS Mallard wanted to know how I was going to feel about this piece, giving my exposure to the subreddit. I'll give this brief diversion, and partly because I think people might think we are always in agreement on how things should be run, maybe in internet outreach. I will kind of take my staff hat off for a second and say that I really dislike Meme Monday on the SCP subreddit. I think it drowns out conversation, but is what it is. I gave that position of head moderator up because I was fully aware I don't have the time to spend in fostering and cultivating that content. So you reap what you sow. That one's on me. Sorry, folks. This is still a really good piece for what it is, a meta little thing, and this was a very easy, very quick +1. Moving on, SCP-4261, In Case of Emergency, Blow Shofar, by Dr. Astari. Now, this one actually does have an image. It is of a shofar, and a shofar is it's a musical instrument of a sort. It's fashioned out of a ram's horn, and it is used during Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. If you remember during that World Cup where they had all the vuvuzelas that were that sort of like really droning sort of sound, a little deeper than that with a little bit more control, that's more or less what you've got. This particular one looks to be quite old. It's not as stylized as a lot of the ones you see these days, and the caption says that it is SCP-4261. This skip has an object class of safe. The procedures are quite lengthy. As a matter of fact, the whole piece is fairly lengthy. It is just this side of long boy territory, but given how many short articles I had this week, I decided to give this one the full treatment. They indicate that it's to be kept in a lockbox with Class 8 thaumaturgic seals within the safe wing of Site-77 under the oversight of the Office of Strategic and Tactical Theology. I love that. With no fewer than 7 active SRAs surrounding the container, it is under Megiddo precautions at all times. We're setting the stakes kind of high for a safe skip. Per the terms of Foundation HI JOA 2-63, we don't elaborate on that at all in a footnote, which it could really use. 3 members of the Sons of Shammai and 3 Foundation employees of verified Abrahamic faith are to be on standby in an adjacent room at all times as preparation for the possible use of 4261. Stakes seem awfully high for this thing. If any of the following circumstances occur, it will be redesignated Thaumiel and is then authorized to be blown 7, and we have 7 in parentheses, by an Abrahamic faithful at the discretion of the site director. So in a level 5 collapsible here, we have some crosslinks. If at any point notification of code Nightmare Regent Red 2317 along with the appropriate code phrases are received, if there is incontrovertible evidence that the Scarlet King is fully manifested in our universe, objective verification that Project Palisade has failed at large and multiversal reality failure is imminent, or any other verified K-class scenario in which the Foundation has objective evidence that multiversal reality failure is imminent. These are all links to other pieces. A lot of cross-linking going on in this work. In no other circumstances are we to blow this shofar. Attempts to utilize it apart from this will result in immediate termination, and that's vague and ominous. Any unauthorized personnel attempting to utilize it, if they are verifiably linked to a GOI, that GOI will be declared an enemy of the Foundation without exception, and its personnel will be treated accordingly. We have another collapsible with an update as of 1/5/2018. Your guess is as good as mine whether that is January 5th or May 1st. It looks to be January 5th because it says following the events of 12/20/2017, and the subsequent dissolution of the Vatican Foundation GOA 729, any members of GOI 182 La Spada de Cristo who are apprehended within 20 kilometers of Site 77 are to be taken off-site immediately for coercive interrogation followed by final processing. That's good and ominous. Under no circumstances are they to be processed on site. So we have set the stakes appropriately high going into the description. It is described as a shofar, a type of trumpet traditionally made of ram's horn, used in ancient Israelite religious ceremonies. This one looks to be the same thing, but is quite a lot stronger. Energy dispersal properties sufficient to withstand an output equivalent to a 3 megaton nuclear device. We have 3.0 megaton nuclear device. I feel like this is the units don't look quite right, or it needs to adjust the significant figures here. It should therefore be noted that in the event of Site 77's failsafe nuclear device activating, retrieval of this item is of the highest priority, as it will most likely have withstood the blast. That's handy. It has a property that activates when it's blown. The sound waves it generates modify local reality, leading to oftentimes drastic changes in Hume levels. Additionally, as the reality-altering effects of sound waves correspond to the power of the sound waves themselves, they are subject to traditional wave interference principles. If the horn is blown more than once in quick succession, the sound waves will amplify and destroy each other at points of constructive or destructive interference, respectively. This will result in corresponding amplification of reality changes with unpredictable results. And for unclear reasons, the amplified sound waves will propagate to roughly 7-fold their expected radius of effect based on standard acoustics principles with corresponding reality changes. I think that's just to give a little religious flavor, because otherwise we're answering questions that weren't asked. It's unknown what will occur if it's blown 7 times in quick succession, but available documentation indicates it may trigger a unique effect that would potentially be detrimental to Foundation interests. As such, testing is currently contraindicated. Oh, and by the way, it has a final property that is unclearly related to its reality-altering ability, namely, exactly 77 seconds after it's blown, all verified adherents of Abrahamic faith who hear the sound will instantaneously dematerialize. Notably, computer-rendered audio of the sound will also trigger the effect. Additionally, all corpses within earshot of the sound will immediately, regardless of their state of decomposition, begin to rapidly move upward at a vector directly perpendicular to the ground. Our satellites have documented a top speed of 0.1 c prior to the objects exiting the upper atmosphere, after which they spontaneously dematerialize. No barrier to date has been able to stop or slow the subject's acceleration. Well, this thing seems altogether Revelation-esque. Now, the Office of Strategic and Tactical Theology has given a note here with their assumptions that they've gleaned given background materials and their educated guess, having dealt in this sort of area for a while. They assign likelihood and confidence scores to 5 different scenarios. That using it 7 times in a row will trigger an XK class scenario, high likelihood and high confidence. That doing so will also trigger a mass dematerialization of all adherents of Abrahamic ideology globally, not just those who are within range of the sound waves. That's high likelihood with low confidence. Those who dematerialize are being transported to an extra-dimensional location, medium likelihood and medium confidence. There is a coordinating force causing the dematerialization of subjects that is capable of triggering an XK class scenario under the right circumstances. That is high likelihood and medium confidence. And lastly, this coordinating force is dematerializing SCP-4261 subjects for a benevolent purpose. Likelihood unable to assess, low confidence. So we have some supporting materials here, which are various pieces, both things that are I don't know how many of these are actual works out and about in the wild, and how many of these were created in Foundation lore, but a couple of these do cross-link to other works. They're pieces of poetry and old letters. There's a letter from Innocentius, Bishop of Rome, that says, "To the Antichrist Ioannis," that's a link to 3221. We shall have nothing to do with you, no alliance, no peace. We stave the world's cleansing only to bring the light of Christ to every corner of the world. Dare to impede the church, set foot on the shores of Italia, and I swear by my Lord Jesus Christ, I shall sound the shofar 7 times and leave this world to burn, and you and your blasphemers shall burn with it. Do not test me. We have a poem at the bottom. It's a Wesleyan hymn that talks about the archangel's trumpet sounding, and basically we're setting the stage for this thing being the real deal here. We go to an addendum with some bad news, and this says and our date formats are not consistent in this. This is on Dec 2017. A group of unknown assailants breached Site 77's outer defenses by thaumaturgic means, and several Class 3 ontokinetic entities rapidly penetrated into the site before MTFs could respond. The pattern of their initial incursion and movements matched predictive models for an attempted theft of 4261 to within 96.54%, triggering on-site mobilization of Automated Response Force Sigma 9 on-thinking servants. This was successful. 17 hostile casualties, 3 prisoners taken, 4 of our Automated Response Force vehicles decommissioned, and a total of 8 Foundation casualties. So we have 3 prisoners, and we have 3 interrogation logs where we go one by one through them. And due to unclear capabilities of these intruders, these interrogations were conducted remotely in a thaumaturgically warded chamber by Interrogator Winfield via video screen. Our first prisoner, as you might expect, is not cooperative. He says, "You've made a terrible mistake. You can still rectify it. Release me and help me recover the shofar, and we can end all this, now and forevermore. Aren't you tired of fighting these abominations of the earth? Aren't you tired of waging endless war? Why not let our Lord judge us? Let him take those he finds worthy. Help me, and you will be among that number, free of all pain." And Winfield repeats himself when he says, "State your name for the record, please." The prisoner says, "So be it then," and he starts chanting in Latin. And Winfield says, "Sorry, is that your first or last name?" And the prisoner gets louder. One of the interrogation room's walls is replaced by a void, and smoke begins pouring out of that void and forms into the shape of 3 Class 3 ontokinetic entities. Our seals don't do all that much. One of the entities is vaporized, but the other 2 are only temporarily stunned. There's an engagement with, backup from the Foundation coming in. Reinforcements arrive with Spell Eater rounds. I like that. The prisoner's found dead in the room after the engagement, though, and the cause of death was cyanide poisoning. The autopsy noted a shattered cyanide capsule buried in a false tooth. We find false teeth with cyanide capsules in the other 2 prisoners, and we up the wards in the interrogation rooms. For the second prisoner, he tries the same thing, and this time a series of protective runes inscribed on the walls flares, and the prisoner grunts in pain and ceases his chanting. Still not cooperating, though, and we change the video screen to show a cognito hazard designed to induce loyalty to the Foundation, and the prisoner grits their teeth and growls, "Do you think your devilry will work so easily on me?" Winfield says, "Let's put it this way. You won't be the first person we've convinced to see the light of day. Why keep fighting it?" He opens his eyes as wide as possible, pupils maximally dilating. They begin to scream wordlessly. He grabs his left wrist with his right, without ceasing his screaming. With a quick jerking motion, he snaps the wrist cleanly, exposing bone. At this point, a bright flash fills the room, and the prisoner continues to scream as his wounds begin to appear on his hands and feet. He begins to bleed profusely from every orifice. Within 20 seconds, he is fully exsanguinated and promptly expires. And the autopsy shows that the prisoner's left radius, that's the bone in your forearm, it was inscribed with a sigil designed to trigger upon exposure to air and blood simultaneously, a rather sophisticated fallback method if one no longer has access to a cyanide capsule. We recommend it remains unclear what capabilities these agents have and what other fallback methods are available to prevent them falling into the wrong hands, and requests approval for Epsilon Protocol, and this is approved by the Ethics Committee. So interesting. Our third prisoner says, "State your name for the record, please," and they respond, "Where am I?" in all caps. And Winfield says, "State your name for the record, please, then we can begin to answer some of your questions." And he says, "My friends call me Fabi." He says, "Excellent, Fabi, my name is Jacob. How are you today?" Fabi says, everything is black. Why can't I feel my arms and legs? And Winfield says, we've ripped your consciousness out of your body and into a computer. But good news, there's a way to put you back into your body. Let's just have a chat first, though. Fabi says, why have you done this to me? Winfield says, well, can't have you trying to kill yourself like your friends. We don't usually like to resort to this, but your team has forced us to get creative. He says, release me this instant. Winfield says, sorry, friend. Can't be doing that just yet. How about we talk first? He begins to chant in Latin, and Winfield says, oh, please, go ahead. I can't wait. Chanting continues for another 30 seconds, and Winfield yawns. Says, all right, that's enough of that. I'm sure by now you've realized it's a bit harder to call on the powers of darkness when you don't even have a proper mouth or body to call with. Fabi says, let me go now. Winfield says, counteroffer. Tell me something I don't know in the next 30 seconds, or I'll put you in a simulated 100,000-year time loop, and then you can tell me something I don't know. There's silence for 30 seconds. Winfield says, all right, have it your way. Fabi says, no, stop. My full name is Fabiano Luciano Velluciani. Says, excellent, now we're getting somewhere. Tell me, Fabiano, what do you do for work? Says, I'm one of the Lord's servants. Says, could you be more specific? It's a big world, a lot of lords out there. He says, I am a blade for Christ. And Winfield says, so what's a Vatican assassin doing so far from home? Fabi says, isn't it obvious? Winfield says, enlighten me. He says, the 7 seals of darkness are shattering, and that's a link to 2317 again. The world is breaking. The abominations appear more rapidly. There is no hope for saving this existence. Winfield says, so spell it out for me. What does this have to do with the horn? Fabi says, the shofar brings about an ending, and for the righteous, hopefully a good one. Winfield says, nobody knows where the disappeared are going, or to what purpose, or what really happens if someone were to blow the horn 7 times. All we've got are guesses. You know that, right? And Fabi says, better this gamble than the 1,000 soul deaths of the abominations that approach. Winfield says, I see. And what about those not of Abrahamic faith? And Fabi says, I echo St. Paul in his epistle to the Romans. Would that I could cut myself off from Christ for the sake of my unsaved brethren, that I could accept damnation for their salvation. Better to gamble on the salvation of some than embrace the sure damnation of all. And we end the article there. We don't end the article. We end the interview saying, back channels verified that Fabiano Velluciani is who he says he is. We've scoured every nearby city, town, and habitation and found another few Spada agents scattered around. They've all been taken off-site for interrogation. Recommendations none at this time. And we have a memo, Dissolution of Vatican Foundation, JOA 729. Hopefully we explain what that is. It reads that the events of December 20th at Site 77 have not been adequately addressed by the Vatican Office for Secrets and Prophecies. Despite consistently disavowing both the existence of and actions committed by GOI 182 La Spada de Cristo, they have refused to share information or render known Spada agents over to Foundation custody. Our intelligence indicates clear financial and operation links between Spada and the Vatican. Under the terms of Vatican Foundation JOA 729, they are therefore considered under the umbrella and jurisdiction of the Vatican and are not to be interfered with by the Foundation. Due to the VOSP's unacceptable lack of cooperation, we are officially invoking the Dissolution Clause of JOA 729. As such, any and all Vatican-affiliated GOIs that the VOSP disavows are no longer subject to diplomatic immunity and are to be treated as independent GOIs. Note, this does not affect any other Vatican Foundation JOAs, nor does this apply to Vatican-avowed GOIs. Signed, Alana Silviatore, Senior Director, Diplomatic Relations Office. End article. So we were doing really well. The pacing was really good. We've got, the Foundation's getting to flex a little bit. We're getting good exposition. And I don't think we do quite enough with it. I don't think our payoff quite meets the build-up. And that's difficult because when the build-up is that good, the payoff becomes, you need like this almost outsized moment of excellence to really have it work. We don't have anything really resembling a conclusion here. And while that makes sense given what's been built, which is that things are ongoing and we don't have a reason to use it yet, it is, I don't know. I don't think what we've left it on is sufficient for the amount of work that we've put into reading and getting this build up and getting this investment. A diplomatic memo doesn't really help us all that much. Like, there's an interesting connection here that perhaps the Vatican is actually working at odds with the Foundation to bring about, the rapture. But we should do more with that. If that's the case, this would be a cool time to maybe do something from like, Vatican letterhead, indicating, maybe we're ending diplomatic relations altogether, the time has come, blah, blah, blah. You can do stuff like that and still leave you with a cliffhanger, but leave you feeling more satisfied that, oh shit, things are really going down in this piece. That's not really what we have here, and I think that's unfortunate because the buildup was really good, but the buildup to payoff ratio is not there, so this is a no vote. Moving on, SCP-4780, titled Shrunk, formerly titled My Socialist Sudoku, by a random day. Now, I'm going to talk about that briefly because it's, alright. So, My Socialist Sudoku is a line in the first few bars of an Aesop Rock song called Shrunk. So, a random day went from a line in the song that was probably too subtle to just going with the title of the song. Instead, we have no images. It's been a light week for images in Works, and this is an object class of Apollyon. And I saw this at, wait a minute. There's some very loudly held opinions going on here that I don't know how to feel about actually seeing this format. And the procedures immediately say, not Apollyon, and I'm going to put out there, this is all in lowercase with a number of typos and abbreviations that I'm going to not get into because they are intentional. And the entire thing is object class Apollyon. Special containment procedures, not Apollyon, needed to get attention. Name Thomas Berger, and level 4 researcher writing 4780 doc about shrink ray, then power surge. Ray hit, shrank me. It has reverse, can unshrink. Hurry, not joke, look me up, and id advanced research complex, room 401, phone dead, am stuck on desk. Typed in SCP form, jumped on keys all night. Hurry, rats in building, hungry rats. Shrinking, still harder to press keys. Will be in 401 on desk. Ray still powered. Point to desk, flip lever to unshrink. Press fire, hurry 1. Description blank. Uploading. ... Error. Description blank. Cannot submit to database. End article. Oh, this piece. So there's a lovely double meaning here that is in this first sentence. Not Apollyon, needed to get attention. This is something that I asked if this was intentional, and it was. That the convention here is that a lot of people, first-time writers, new writers, will use Apollyon to raise the stakes, using it for, cheap drama, that it's like, super Keter. So this guy filled out the form hoping that people will, get to it more quickly because it's an Apollyon skip. But it says not Apollyon, needed to get attention. It's a subtle little thing, and there's actually some subtle horror going on here. This is not a joke article. This is a main lister, because there are good horror elements. If you can put yourself in the position of this character, there's rats in the building. They're still shrinking. Apparently, it's really not good. And then nobody got the memo. That's horrifying. But I told him that I was going to talk about this one because I'm talking about all of them this week. There's not going to be a whole lot to deconstruct in this thing. It's one paragraph, but I like it. It is probably the biggest thing is that you can be funny and not be a joke article. There are some comments, saying this would have worked better as a joke, and I disagree because I think if the intention isn't to make it a J, then just being funny doesn't mean it needs to be in that category. There's plenty of main list entries that are there on merit and are fine not being a J. This is one of them. This was a very easy +1. Moving on, last but not least, my first ever translation piece on SCP Cafe. This is SCP-281-FR by Dr. Gemini originally, translated into English by Dr. Macro and Floppy Phoenix. This is a very cool piece. It's a bit lengthy, so we're going to try and summarize it just a bit. Since it is French, we do have a threat level of green and an object class of safe. Before you get to that, though, you have this header at the top that says, warning, this document is initially authorized for personnel with a Mod 3 level accreditation only. You are about to consult sensitive You're about to consult sensitive information. You will not be subject to any memetic or amnestic agents during or after your reading. You will not be subject to any localization, incarceration, armed intervention, or execution. You have the right to know, but you are not obligated to. That's something entirely different from what you would normally see in an English wiki piece, and I don't know how much of that is a convention that you would normally see in a French piece, and how much of it is just this piece being unique. The procedures are very lengthy. To summarize, the skip is contained in a reinforced tungsten containment constraint within a local site Daoud, which is a 50 square meter site within Zone 88, codenamed Jaloux, which is a military base officially belonging to the U.S. but is actually operated by the GOC. We have put censorship and disinformation operations into play to protect this, including shifting the official South Pole 4 kilometers from this skip's location and falsifying various kinds of info concerning the history of expeditions to Antarctica since 1911, as well as the fundamental geological and astronomical nature of the Earth. So stakes are high, and that's an interesting clash of what we've just discussed, and that this is apparently a safe class skip. It's hard to imagine how we get there from here. This local site, Daoud, is under constant pressure from the GOC, who are seeking to take the skip for various purposes that we're not 100% clear on. These claims have lasted since the Foundation initially contained it in 1948, and given diplomatic relations between the GOC and the Foundation, the pressures are not military in nature at this time, but in the event that the situation changes, the Bell Protocol must be initiated. ORIA is involved in this, the Office for Reclamation of Islamic Artifacts. It is currently at the heart of the Jihad of the Nine, which is a military religious conflict that we are engaged in with ORIA. They claim that this skip was one of the founding objectives of the entire group. There's significant geographical distance between the South Pole and their bases, so these jihad operations are rare but significant. Additionally, we've got Islamic texts that indicate that several of the components of the skip would be called upon to be recovered and used during a revelation-type end-of-the-world event by a Class 7 or higher reality manipulator. Dash 5 is assumed to be recovered by the Prophet Ali during the Last Judgment. Dash 1 is assumed to be recovered by the Prophet Jesus to fight the Antichrist. In the event that this situation occurs, the Anu Protocol must be initiated. In any case, it is assumed that removing one of the components of SCP-281-FR or damaging its integrity could cause an XK class event. Whew. We then go into a history of incidents at the sites, starting in 1952, where we established the zone. Site directors at a few points in time have been arrested for noncompliance with orders and corruption. We have clashes going through the 80s with Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, apparently behind one of the ultimatums to return the sword to Iran. At this point, they don't get a response and declare the Jihad of the Nine, July 7th, 1981, which it accompanies with the filmed execution of 2 GOC agents. In 83, about 20 jihadists manifest in the hangars of Zone 88 with the help of transport circles, and all jihadists were shot after killing about 15 people. Going into the early 90s, we have raids at a few points during the 90s, and in the we suspect Sapphire is getting involved, which is another French GOI that's honestly pretty cool. We've talked about them a few during IntCon. Sapphire got their first showing on Cafe. In the late 90s, there were information leaks concerning the nature of the skip and the involvement of the GOC, allowing for blackmail on our behalf against several members of the GOC. And this causes a decrease in pressure on Zone 88. And in 05, our last entry in here, an abnormally modified bomb is transported anomalously to the site, which is defused in time shortly after a dozen jihadists appear, shot dead without losses by soldiers who were waiting for them in ambush. And those are all part of the procedures. The history is in sort of an odd place, but I'll, chalk that up to stylistic differences here. We get into the description, which is that it is a set of 9 swords of various shapes and sizes, similar in style to Arab weaponry of the late 7th century, comprised of various metals with iron or bronze blades, handles of gold, silver, or copper, with leather, traces of ivory or precious stones. These are classified as -1 through -9. All are planted approximately 15 centimeters into the ground at a single point at the Earth's exact geographic south pole. Latitude 90 degrees south, longitude doesn't really matter. When it was discovered, it was reported to the Foundation in October 1947. 281 FR was accompanied by a sign reading, "Please, PLS, thank you for not touching the swords, under penalty of giving the impression that the world was destroyed, which would worry a lot of people over nothing. Sincerely yours, Sapphire." I love that. We've raised the stakes. It's been serious. And this, please, thank you for not touching the swords. I love that. So, officially, the Foundation has always respected the sign and never attempted to take action on it. Unofficially, all attempts to remove some or all of the swords have ended in failure, whether by human, mechanical, or thaumaturgical means, and all attempts were abandoned upon the discovery of several sensitive documents, see addenda. It's assumed that 281 FR is an essential element of the globe's geological structure, and that damaging its integrity could potentially cause the discontinuation of the terrestrial globe. Its irremovability, this is a word that I don't know if it actually exists. Irremovability is due to an attractive force of several 100 million newtons of undetermined origin exerted by each of its components on the other components. This force of attraction does not seem to apply to objects other than the swords themselves. The Department of Theology proposed the hypothesis that each component must have its own abnormal capability, which could manifest itself when each component is individually used as a weapon, but we can't prove this because, well, we can't get them out of the ground. And we go into addenda from here, of which there are 3. The first is epistolary documents. These are back and forth between a professor of applied mathematics at Sorbonne University in Paris and a consultant of theirs that is not really given, they're the head of the Lodge of New York, Patrick Silverstein. So the first of these letters is from Silverstein to this professor, the head of the Lodge of Paris. So we've got the Paris head and the New York head writing back and forth. And he says, "My dear friend, I hope everything's going well for you and that you do not have too many properties to rebuild in the old continent. I heard about your last operation, where the whole parish was put into orbit for a few minutes, just to properly show them that the Earth was round. Too bad they were brought back a little too late, but I'm sure they had the time to fully realize their mistake before they passed away. What better show than the truth, after all?" So, as we have the same kind of problem here, known as the Universal Zetetic Society. Those are now the Flat Earth Society as of the 50s. And basically says we have an answer to our problem. That NASA is sending a ballistic missile into the upper atmosphere for purely scientific purposes, and it will be equipped with a camera. So finally we'll have photographic and indisputable evidence that the Earth is round, to be widely broadcast, an unstoppable means of popularization, which should eliminate the bad skeptics from the landscape. Tell me if you're interested. I will send you a copy of these photographs as soon as possible so that Sapphire's European lodges can have them ahead of all the media. So we're dealing with Sapphire here. These are 2 Sapphire directors in various cities. So this Parisian director is very, very flattered that they were being kept up with that closely. And they say the flattists, as they say in the jargon, are definitely a plague. Skepticism must apply in the face of the illogical, not the logical. Otherwise, it is little more than monstrous bigotry. Sapphire members in France will gladly take your photographs of the Earth from above. The weight of words, the shock of photographs, isn't it? Fighting against the most harmful communities of Christianity in particular seems to be the priority at this time. We can't even debate peacefully with these Jewish morons anymore without being looked at wrong now. The politically correct, you know how it is. Yeah, I guess that's not quite PC, is it? So we hear nothing for another 8 months or so, and it is from Silverstein to Professor Malesherbes in Paris. It says, "My dear friend, well. Shit, and shit is said about 50 times here. Please find attached, as promised, the photographs of the Earth taken from space by NASA's ballistic missile. Their disclosure to the general public has been blocked until further notice." That's ominous. And at this point, I'm like, no, we're not really. Yeah, we are. We get a reply back. It says, "My dear friend, fuck." So another letter comes back. "My dear friend," and they begin to explain a meeting they attended as the Sapphire's representative on the Council of 108, which we haven't yet explained. "I was able to take advantage of today's session at the GOC to evoke concern for the aesthetic and purely illusory appearance of our beautiful planet, namely that, as seen from space, the globe appears to resemble a flat disk bordered by a large ice wall. Apparently, among the 107 other organizations that were brought together in the coalition, a large part of them were already aware of this optical effect." The Earth's flat. Or at least it appears that way. Basically, the punchline to this meeting is that all of the council believes that the Earth is flat and that they don't understand what Sapphire wants to do. Sapphire wants to fix a little aesthetic problem, to give back the globe the appearance that it should have. And the assembly stayed to watch, and finally, Supreme Master Abraham of the Illuminati. I've never heard him stutter before. I don't think anyone else has either. He says, You want to make the Earth round? You'll understand that I had the sudden laziness to tell him that no, the Earth was already round and that we were just going to make it look the way it should. I decided instead to move directly into technical considerations. Hence my question, do you still have the 9 swords of Muhammad in stock? And we get the response back, I confirm that we should be able to gather the swords of Muhammad. Singularities BRO-2562-ISL 2, 3, and 4 must have taken dust at the Lodge of Marseille. At last news, they were doing tests to verify their attraction is indeed of magnetic origin and not unique. Unfortunately, it is, and no force manifests itself once in their sheaths. 7 is hidden somewhere in the Lodge of Cairo. I have sent a letter. 1, 5, 8, and 9 were stolen by the Thule Society to serve the strange rituals of the Nazis, but they were recovered during the liberation. It should now be stored in a crate lost in the Louvre's reserves. Nothing that is unrecoverable. I'll put all this together to keep you more fully informed as things progress. We'll see you at the Interlodge Summit anyway, won't we? You can then be able to share with us all the projects that are germinating in your mind. And that's the end of the first addendum. I love this addendum. The dialogue is fantastic. We don't get too far ahead of ourselves at any point in the writing, and it's all very beautifully written. This is an outstanding translation job that still has a touch of that French influence in word choices, and it's altogether very beautiful. Addendum 2 is an archived document that was recovered by a raid at the home of a senior researcher in 1998, and it is from Sapphire. It is to a Mrs. Blackbox and indicates you've been selected to be part of the Galilei Delta Rubies, and Rubies is an initialism, all caps with a dot between each letter in Rubies. Your departure for the South Pole is scheduled for March 5th. More information will be sent to you shortly regarding the time and point of departure. Operation Galileo was established in order to synchronize the spherical nature of the globe, which don't have to be proven for ages, with its aesthetic appearance, which unfortunately makes it appear flat in the eyes of the neophyte. It was decreed at the 55th Summit that singularities 1 through 9, better known as the Swords of Muhammad, would be gathered and used to counter this most unfortunate illusion. 9 teams of rubies will depart by 9 different routes to the South Pole, or, as more whimsical members of the GOC call it, the glacial border, to reach the 9 points that are singularly opposite, which will objectively form the South Pole. Each individual rubies will be in possession of a sword. You will receive 3 al-Kadib in its sheath. You must reach Point Delta, unsheath the sword at the specified time, and drive it into the specified point immediately. You don't need to know any more at this time. The Khalid Vwich effect states any bladed weapon planted in the ground can only be dislodged under special conditions, typically by the action of a conscious person. This effect should ensure a firm grip of the singularities in the Earth's crust and assure that the crust will bend seamlessly by accompanying the attraction the singularities exert between each other until they meet at point Alpha Prime, which in fact corresponds to the true South Pole. The Earth's crust will remain a coherent and stable whole. It should be noted that its deformation will only be illusory, and that the mere concept of trying to deform it would be perfectly ridiculous. For the operation's entire duration, do not unsheath the singularity before the specified time. Yours sincerely, Black Box. We have an image below that, and it's really cool. It is a sphere, a globe, and it's being intersected by 9 swords, and there's little dashed lines. You really should take a look at this 281FR to see this. This is a nice little addition that I think adds a ton of flavor to the piece. Addendum 3 is a GOC archived document, and this is from the Council of 108. And what we talk about the platform. The platform was a cutting-edge proto-informatics network implemented to enable members of the Council of 108 constituting the high command of the GOC to communicate remotely in real time. And this was 50 years ahead of its time, roughly comparable to a social network. We only discovered it in 1995. And a copy of these archives was provided to us by an anonymous informant codenamed Pinhead in 1999. And this document is basically almost like a chat log, and it has various groups speaking and other groups seeing and validating the responses. Almost like a old-timey blockchain where other people have validated the message that was put out there. The way that this format works is that there are a number of factions of groups that comprise this council. They're noted in bold, and it is an absolute who's who for conspiracy theorists. There's the Bavarian Illuminati, there's the members of the Majestic 12, the United Church of Satan, the Priory of Sion, the Black Ocean Society, the Walt Disney Company. There's a lot of good stuff in this log. And we spell out Sapphire, I think for the first time I've seen it in English, the Society of the Atheist Partisans of Progress for the Halt of the Irrational and Religious Enemy. Basically, the Illuminati saying that Sapphire said they were going to give us plans last Monday. They didn't. Silverstein announced a delay and assured us they would be giving those details as soon as they were finalized. Majestic 12 reminds protesters as members of the council and therefore of the New World Order, whether some like it or not, the Atheist Society has all our confidence in developing a plan that is discreet, functional, and without adverse consequences. Then we have the United Church of Satan also chiming in, reminding the 52 practicants of the New World Order that are of para-religious nature, the law of cordial secularism is until further notice the norm within the council. Any criticism of the choices and practices of the Atheist Society is taken into account, but irrelevant within the coalition's formal framework. I think the idea here is that the various religious organizations that comprise the New World Order are simply maintaining a veil of their own. The Illuminati emphasizes the fact the Council's information sharing platform is open to all Council members, with the exception of the Atheist Society. This is in no way due to a lack of trust toward them, but any mention of the existence of the platform to one of their members will be punished. Majestic 12 points out, concerning the suspicions of destruction of the Earth's hidden side, the sketches of the Galileo project seem to aim at closing the glacial border, contracting it to form a second pole on the planet. The hidden side would, therefore, be preserved, but it would constitute the inner surface of an empty globe. Are you following? Are you seeing what they're saying? They're saying, not only is the Earth flat, but there's shit going on the other side of the disk, if you will, and that by Sapphire's plan to draw it into a globe, this hidden side would be the inside of our globe. So we are going from flat Earth to hollow Earth, and new continental tunnels will be established. And the Vril Society declares it is very enthusiastic about the idea of literally closing the Vril territory's borders, definitely solving the problem of migrants who cross the edge of the world to settle on their territory, taking the place of honest citizens in cold blood. The Shambhala chain will be pulled so that the second moon does not cause a collision when the Earth's crust closes. Once moved, the second moon will continue to be the source of light and heat, fueling the other side. It will be aligned to form the center of the new globe, and will establish a new balance. So, inside our planet, a second moon. Got it. Cicada 3299 notes the significant saving of time and resources if no more ships, planes, or exploration troops swing over the edge anymore, and if their disappearance no longer needs to be covered. The Masonic propaganda of the Grand Orient reminds everyone that the round Earth is already the accepted model throughout the civilian world, and that if the transition from flat Earth to hollow Earth goes smoothly, only the world's astronomical data will have to be modified to camouflage the operation. In the event of a significant incident, the threat of war between the US and the Soviet Union will serve as the perfect diversionary or justification instrument, and the Priory of Zion would also like to put back on the agenda the question of the Greater Israel Plan and relations of dominance that will become more complicated with the organization of the American-Soviet conflict. Is the Great Replacement, and those are both capitalized, still relevant in the high American spheres, and above all, how should it be, and indeed should it be, addressed in the Soviet territories? We end the article there. I can take or leave that very last passage. Everything else in this piece is super, super cool. I am a huge fan of the Deus Ex franchise. Like all the wacky conspiracy theories rolled into one. This satisfies that itch on a deep spiritual level. So to recap, Sapphire has noted the Earth appears to be flat, but is in fact round, and the New World Order notes the world is indeed flat and is in fact flat, but they have successfully put out there that it is round, and that Sapphire's plan is doable. They're intentionally excluded from this conspiracy, and the New World Order will be able to make it work. I really dig this. It doesn't have... It's interesting as an SCP document because our involvement with this is actually minimal. And the bulk of this work is in storytelling through Sapphire and the GOC and the New World Order. It's a really interesting way to go about it. It is very, very underrated right now at plus 27. Maybe conspiracy theory stuff isn't for everyone. I really like this as an ambitious piece that is well executed and introduces some really interesting technology and has some mixed media in its favor as well that really, really does make this an outstanding skip. This was a great +1 from me. And that's week 29. That was all of them. 6 pieces, all of them interesting. None of them bad. Some things I would do differently, or I think, need some more time in the incubator, but some really good pieces as well. We have a couple of mailbag questions. Christian Wright asks, what's been the hardest part about producing the podcast? What do you anticipate difficulty with in the future? And what's your favorite thing about making it? Hardest part at this point is that it's my voice. It's trying to keep up with fluids and talk for upwards of 2 hours every week. I don't think we're really meant to do that. So I go through a ton of water, and what you don't see, or if you occasionally do like the live stream thing, is there are fairly common breaks throughout because I'm going through water so fast I've got to pee like all the time. It's terrible. I enjoy selection day. I like being able to talk in the SCP Cafe chat about everything that we're looking at and have interesting conversations with people on, seeing new lines for the first time, something that I really, really appreciate. and there's one of those coming next week that even if I don't include in week 30, I'll make mention of it. Seeing those little lines for the first time and relaying them to others, and just that sharing of the enjoyment of things that we all love so much is definitely my favorite part of it. Difficulty in the future, I don't really think there is. It's basically just try to continue the growth, and I don't really know what the next step is to accomplish that. But I haven't been working on it all that hard either. As far as like, how do I keep growing the thing, get more and more people? It is closing in, like any given week now, I'm doing about 2,000 plays a week, which is a wild number, and closing in on 25,000 plays on Spotify. So just keep the growth going, keep the I want to grow the community, and keep people around maybe in the chat that want to talk about stuff, and figure out how to get more maybe more of the bonus content out on a regular schedule. It is tough. I work 45-50 hours a week, and then have other wiki duties with all the other stuff I list off in the intro that have to get done as well. So it's finding time probably is a big challenge as well. And AIS Mallard asks, after you've chosen the skips for the week, how do you choose what order to present them in? The only real rule of thumb is that whichever one I lead in with, I cover last. Beyond that, it's mostly as the spirit moves me. I will try to have breaks in things to where if there's some really, body horror, if there's two that have a related theme, I try to break them up unless they're so tightly connected that it makes more sense to talk about them together. It's more art than science. It's really as the spirit moves me. That's about it. We're out of here for now. Week 30 show will be, hopefully, this one out a day late. Planning on next Friday, the 26th. So keep an eye and an ear out for the CollabCon recap. We will go into every piece, and patrons will get that a week early. If you thought this show was worth $1, patreon.com/SCPcafe does give you access to ask mailbag questions, get early access to this bonus content, and a number of other things. Take a look and see if there's anything you're interested in. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.